I have been babysitting for a long time, but there was only one time that scared me so badly I almost considered to stop doing it. But goodness, I didn't, because I love to be babysitting for friends, family, or other people. But anyways, this was what happened to me 8 years ago, around 2015, when I was just 17 years old, still in high school. I prefer not to be using my real name, so I just take a name Carol. And like I said, I have been babysitting for quite some time at this point. When I was just 17, I already have been babysitting my younger siblings, neighbors, even even other family members, and even some friends of my parents. But one day, my mom asked me if I was interested to look after a colleague of hers, her two kids, Miss Jackson, who was a 30-year-old single mother, and she had a boy named Robin, 5 years old, and a daughter, Jessica, 3 years old. I was very not hesitating to say no, because I actually had met Miss Jackson a few times, and she was a very responsible young mother, single mother. And the first time I was introduced to Robin and Jessica, just a day before I actually was supposed to babysit them, I was actually very happy to see them. They were quite shy around me, but which is normal, to be honest. I was like that myself in when I was in their age. But anyways, the day came when I was supposed to be babysitting Robin and Jessica. Miss Jackson said that she was going out of town for a few hours to see a relative of hers that was not feeling well, but she couldn't bring her two kids with her. And since she didn't have any other people that she could ask, and my mom had heard about this, and she suggested me for looking after her two kids, which I didn't mind, since my mom had already told Miss Jackson, that I had quite some experience of looking after younger kids before. And on the day when I came over to her house, she gave me a list of like what her kids are not allowed to eat, like say something allergic reactions, and she even gave me a list of things to do with them, like playing games or watch TV or something. And also the list showed that they were supposed to be in bed at certain time. And she also gave her the number of hers just in case if something would have happened or if I want to ask her something about the kids. Which I said thanks, and she went off. For the first few hours, we were actually outside in the backyard playing games and tag or had some snacks, and afterwards, when it would get dark, we decided just to watch some movies and some TV. But it wasn't until like 8 p.m. that was time for both Jackson, Jessica, and Robin to get in bed, which they were not hesitating to say no to, because I thought they would make a lot of fuss that they didn't want to go to sleep so soon. But they were actually quite tired and they could barely keep themselves awake. After I had put them to sleep, they were fast asleep already. And so I went downstairs to the living room to watch some TV, and I did text Miss Jackson that both Jessica and Robin were full asleep at the time. She sent another text back and said thanks, and that she would be back home around 3 a.m. or something like that, or maybe earlier, it depends. And throughout the entire time, and this was still around 8 p.m. time or something like that, I've been just watching some TV but it was something around maybe almost around 2 hours later, around 10 p.m. when I heard a knock on the door. I was like, who is this showing up here? Because Miss Jackson told me that she is not expecting anyone. And it was not like a delivery, since most delivery services had this stop even around 8 p.m. And I wasn't expecting anyone. And if one was expecting someone, they would have called or texted me. I looked at my phone, nothing. So I went over to the door, but I had always had always been taught to be careful, and luckily though, I just started to follow that guidelines. I looked at people and I saw this older guy outside. He was probably in his early to mid 30s, around the same age as Miss Jackson. I know that Miss Jackson were at the time when she had Jessica, that her father was abusive, a toxic. So he was forbidden to even approach her home or even to have anything to do with Jessica or his older son Robin. But apparently, I was not expecting this. In fact, I was told from my mom that Miss Jackson's ex-boyfriend was quite abusive and a very toxic person, and that she had a restraining order against him, prevented him from even getting like 500 feet close to her. But somehow he must have found out that she was out of town, and that was perfect time to even to get over to her house and perhaps, I don't know, take the kids with him. But he didn't know who was going to look after his kids. But I heard a knock again, calmly, and asked for me to open the door. Even Miss Jackson had told me if someone would show up, I should tell them not to, that they are not allowed to come inside, that they should return the next day when she is home. But especially if her ex-boyfriend would show up, which very unlikely he would, but just in case if, I would tell him right straight that he is not allowed to be inside, and if he didn't leave, I would call the police on him. But when I said that to him, it somehow slipped. It's like a switch turned off his head, and like he started banging, slamming himself against the door, demanded me to open the door so that he said, quote, "So I can see my kids. I want to see my kids," he screamed. And he's banging, kicked, and slammed himself against the door. But luckily, this door was so firmly thick enough that it didn't even budge. And based on the tone of his screaming and how he acted, it was clearly that he was completely wasted. According to my mom, her Miss Jackson's ex-boyfriend was a strict alcoholic person. So it's clearly has been drinking enough. So I told him once again, leave or I call the police. But then it stopped. I looked at the people and he was gone. I was like, okay, maybe that scared him off. But not only less than a minute later, I heard a smash from the back door. I was like, what? And I ran to the store to see that someone had thrown a rock or a brick through the glass window of the back door, and saw a hand slowly turned in to open the door from the inside. I know exactly what it was. And without a doubt, it was the ex-boyfriend. And I didn't hesitate. I took off. I ran up the stairs, ran to Robin and Jessica's room. They were sharing a room, thankful that. I locked the door and put a dresser in front of the door, and during the commotion, Jessica was awake and crying, and Robin as well. I told them this fine. We were just playing a game. Because how would I even try to explain to them what is happening? They wouldn't even understand it. So I grabbed my phone and quickly dialed 911, and the operator asked for was emergency. I told him exactly what's going on while hearing the ex-boyfriend downstairs. The operator told me that the police will be there in less than 5 minutes. Try to keep the door locked and blocked so that this man would not even get inside. And I hang up. I even called Miss Jackson on the phone, but since she was like, what, 3 hours away, so it would take her at least a while to get back. But she was frankly when I told her what was happening, because she could even hearing alone in the background the smashing and her kids crying. I told her what was going on, and I also told her that the police were on the way, and I also mentioned that It was clearly that he was completely wasted, and that made her even more scared. Because she told me when he's that drunk, it's unpredictable what he could do. He nearly one time nearly killed her when I was smashing her to the bloody pulp, is what she said. But luckily though, less than while I was on the phone, I heard the distant sirens. And I thought maybe when he heard the sirens he would take off. But no, he didn't. In fact, it made him even more crazier downstairs. He was running up to the stairs and he heard me on the phone and he started yelling, slamming his head against the door and said, let me in, I want to have my kids, he screamed. But it didn't take long for the police to stop outside the house, and I opened a window and like, he's in here! He's under the door! But that made him even more furious that I actually called the police on him. He's trying to slam, and I could actually hear the door was getting off the hinges of this, doing this. It was only a matter of time before he would get in. But luckily for the police, they were outside the door, told him to drop the knife from which he took from the kitchen. Later, I used a taser to stop him from even doing more harm. I later found out he was both under the influence of meth and alcohol. And of course, the knife was meant for me, because he believed I was there to prevent him from seeing his kids, which by law he didn't have the rights anymore. But to make it long story short, he had intent to kill me so that he could take the kids with him, so take them far away so they wouldn't even see their mother again. According to his words, she was a demon that broke the family apart. But Miss Jackson came back home less than as fast as she could. She was grateful that I protected both Robin and Jessica. Because after the police had put them in the car, I had actually called my mom what was happening. She came over, and I told the police that my mom is coming over to help me, and they left. Only about a few hours later, Miss Jackson showed up. She paid me the more double for my efforts, for my saving of her kids. And would that have meant the end that she would eventually move away, far away from this place? No. She actually still lived in the same house, but had upgraded to more security. And I still babysat both Robin and Jessica, even until they were old enough to have, so that her mom could hire another permanent nanny or babysitter. But I'm still occasionally seeing both Robin and Jessica, and they still remember me as the best babysitter they had in their life. So, to Robin and Jessica, you are two sweet angels. To Miss Jackson's ex-boyfriend, stay away from us. Hi, my name is Angela. I love doing babysittings for friends and family. The fact is, I've been doing it since I was 14 years old. I was looking after my two youngest siblings, some of my cousins, and even some of my neighbors' kids. But only one time that really much the most terrifying me, which didn't stop me from doing babysitting, no, oh no. But it happened after during the winter of 2018. I was 25 years old at the time. My friend Veronica was a single mother. She had a daughter named Jessie, who was 4 years old, and Veronica is the same age as me. She told me that she had been doing a lot of an overnight shift at work, and she was asking me if I could look after Jessie for the night, since she had asked around but no one else couldn't do it. And since I had a day off the next day from that at the time, so I was like, why not? And I also needed some money myself since my car needed some repairs and I was a bit short. And I was like, why not? And after all, Jessie loves me. She calls me Auntie Angela. I was like, Auntie Angela is coming over, and she laughs and smiles at that. But Jessie was a sweet girl. After that, and Veronica thanked me and left for work. And this is not the first time I was looking after Jessie. But after her mom left, since it was still in the early afternoon, so me and Jessie took a walk around the neighborhood, went back, built a snowman, made some snow angels, and even had a hot cocoa while looking at some movies. And since she was supposed to be in bed around 8 p.m., but since I was the one that looking after her, so I decided to let her be up a little bit longer. But it wasn't like until 9:30 p.m., which she was really tired, so I decided why not to put her to bed. I prepared her, and after I put her to sleep, she was fast asleep. Didn't take long for that. I went downstairs just to watch some more TV, and even during the time, Veronica had texted me and asked how things was going so far. I said, things has just been normal, nothing to worry about. But around, I'll say 10:30 p.m., I actually woke up from a noise. Apparently, I had fallen asleep on the couch. At first, I didn't know exactly what woke me up, and I sat up on the couch, listened again, but at first I didn't hear anything. I thought maybe I thought I heard something, and tried to go back to sleep. But the sound came back again, but this time, crashing sound. Crashing of smashing glass. I immediately quickly stood up, grabbed my phone that was on the living room table, and tiptoed over to the corner to the kitchen, and sure enough, I saw someone walking in, at least open the door slowly, and since it was quite dark, I had turned off the TV at the time, and I quickly walked up the stairs into Jessie's room, and even from her room, I can hearing that someone was walking downstairs, and opened doors, and I know exactly what it was. Someone had made a burglary. They broke in to steal some things. But it wasn't just one person. Apparently, it was two guys. I could actually hear them talking from different tones of the voices. I immediately called for 911. The operator told me that they had actually a car in the area. And well, they showed up, but when they heard, but the intruders heard the sirens, they're like, ah, man, someone else yelled out, crying, screaming, and they took off. But unfortunately, the police managed to capture at least one of them. But the other guy, he escaped. But only a few days later, they managed to find him as well. And I was just glad. And surprising enough, both were in their early 20s, like myself. And I was like, wow. But they were just, this was apparently the first time of breaking into someone's house. And after the police had arrested the first guy that same night, I texted Veronica explaining what happened. She was freaked out, but I told her police had only caught one of the guys and that we were safe. And the police decided to have a car outside the house just in case if the other guy would return, which he never did. But like I said, he was eventually caught only a few days later. Veronica thanked me over and over for what I did. And in fact, Jessie though, after all of this, she was fast asleep. She didn't even wake up a second when those two guys were in the house roaming around for some things to steal. Even when one of the guys yelled out, "Oh man," I was like, how in the world she even did that? Well, but at least she was. At least it's a good thing that she never woke up, because otherwise I had no idea how they would react. But those guys would have been given at least about 8 years sentence of breaking in. And well, did this stop me from doing babysitting and Did it stop my, or did it hurt my friendship with Veronica? Not at all. In fact, I'm still looking after Jesse from time to time, and I still love doing babysitting for friends and family. And those two guys, well, even though they're still in jail by now, please, let us never meet ever again. And for another thing is, I hope you learned this mistake so that you will not do the same thing again. Thank you. My name is Daniela. I have a quite a terrifying story from the time when I was babysitting for a single father that was a friend of my parents. This happened 10 years ago, around the summer of 2013. I was 16 years old and still in high school. I actually had been doing some babysittings before this, but this far is the most terrifying time I ever done as a babysitting. But it didn't stop me from doing something I liked to do, and especially to help others in need. But like I said, this was during the summer of 2013, so during my summer break, and since a lot of my friends were either out of town or busy themselves, and and since I needed some money from time during the summer, and my parents told me that one of their friends, Thomas, a single father who was 35, needed a babysitter for his son, Kevin. I actually had met Thomas and his son a few times before, so it was someone I was familiar with. Even though this is not maybe not irrelevant, but Thomas actually went to the same high school as my parents, so at least they know each other for many, many years. And since I didn't have any other plans for the summer, well, for a couple of days at least, and since I needed some money for, well, for something, I don't even remember what it was, since it was 10 years ago. So I decided, why not? So my dad drove me over to Thomas' house, since was going to be Thomas was going to be out of town for about a day for a business trip. And since Kevin was already used by me, I had no problem with that. And Thomas gave me a list of things what we can do and all that. He even left some money for me so that if I want to buy a pizza for me and Kevin. And after that, he said goodbye to his son and left. And in fact, me and Kevin, we spent most of the day with playing tags and even swim around in a pool in the backyard. And I have to say, Kevin was the most energetic kid I ever had looked after. While he kind of reminded me of my younger brothers at the time, he was very energetic, like very hyper. But in the evenings, after we had dinner, I received a call from Thomas asking me if I could stay one more day since apparently his business trip had been extended with one more day, and I had no problem with that. And he thanked me and he said that he will pay me the double for that, for the problem. So I told Kevin about it, and even though he was a little bit sad that his dad was not gonna be home the next day, but I promised him that we can go to the park the next day and had a lot of fun. And he actually was quite ecstatic. So the next day, we actually went to the park. We went to the playground and he went to the swings, the slides, you name it. He had us a great time. And even afterward, when I was in the park, while he was playing, I did notice from a bench at a distance this middle-aged woman around the same age like his Kevin's father, Thomas, around 30 to 35, I believe, looking at him. And I was very guilty bit. Maybe she wasn't looking at particularly at Kevin. There were quite a few kids around the same age at the playground, so maybe one of the kids was one of her kids. So after that, I took Kevin to an ice cream shop in town to buy some ice cream and just walking around, having a good time. But we went back in the later afternoon to watch some movies and have dinner. But It wasn't like until later that evening, around, I would say maybe it's 9 p.m. after that Kevin had went to bed. I was just sitting in the living room watching some TV, and when I heard knocking on the door, I was like, I don't expecting anyone, and if it was Thomas, he wouldn't even have needed to knock since he had a key already. And I know that wouldn't be my parents, because they would have told me either by text or calling me in advance that they would be coming over. And I looked at my phone, no text, no call. So I didn't know what I was expecting, and what I know for certain there would not be one of the neighbors, since no problem with that. So I walked out to the door, and since this door didn't have a peephole on it, so I couldn't just see from that. And since it was 9 p.m. and I didn't know who was standing on the other side, but luckily though, there was this small window next to the door. I looked for it. I saw it was the same woman from the park. Okay, why would she be here? Does she know Thomas somehow? Are they friends? So I told her that I asked her why she was here. At first she didn't say anything. She was just knocking. I said again firmly, "Why are you here at 9 p.m.? Thomas is not at home." Then I heard this woman's voice, and it was actually quite soft, gentle. She said that she was here seeing her son. Her son. This was Karen, Kevin's mother. She was the same age as Thomas. But here's the thing about Karen. She is not allowed to even be as near either Thomas or Kevin for a very good reason. You see, when Kevin was born, Thomas and Karen was engaged, or at least I believe that they were just dating at the time. But after that, Karen started to behave strangely. It wasn't until like when her son, Kevin, was 2 years old, when things took a very dark turn. Out of the blue, she started accusing Thomas from cheating with different multiple women from work or anything, which was completely false. But she didn't believe any other explanations. Even when Thomas was out with some of his co-workers or even with my parents, she still didn't even believe that. In fact, she took a whole new level. Even when she still accused him, she started to abusing Thomas. Literally abusing. She started scratching his face with her nails. She used any time of items that she could use as a weapon, like from a knife or anything. She literally tried to stab Thomas to death by using one of the kitchen knife while he was asleep middle of the night. And in fact, when this happened, she believed that she had killed her boyfriend or fiance, or I don't know what they were, but she actually decided to take out her other part of the life. She wanted to be free from this, what she called as a lifetime tournament. She literally referred her family, her Thomas and her son, as a torture. She actually decided even to kill Kevin while he was only 2 years old. But what she didn't know, Thomas actually survived, and while this is happening, he heard that he was in his room, and he heard Kevin crying, and he ran into the room, find Karen standing over the crib, tried to suffocate Kevin. He managed, despite being almost weak of losing blood, he smashed his bare hand against the side of her head, which made her dizzy and fell to the ground, hitting her head to the floor. And he called for 911 immediately. And when the police and the ambulance arrived, she was still out cold from the hit from the floor. And luckily though, Kevin had no permanent injuries from that being suffocated. And so, long story short, Karen was permitted into psych ward for quite a while, actually, for a few years. But she was also forbidden to even have any form of contact with either Thomas or Kevin, and she had to stay at least 200 feet away from both of them. For a number of years after since that happened, Kevin grew up very cheerful and looks like has no memories of what happened, which is a good thing. Thomas, even though he know that one day Karen would come out and probably would break the law by breaking restraining order and try to harm him again, but he was happy that he had moved on. But overall, Karen demanded to see Kevin. I was like, Kevin is not even wanted to see you anymore. She called me a liar and screaming like a banshee. Like, I need to see my son. He is my son. Please let me in. Thomas, let me in. But clearly I didn't get it that Thomas was not even home. I was like, Karen, if you don't leave, I will call the police. But she didn't listen. She started banging, screaming like a lunatic at the door. In fact, during this commotion, Kevin woke up. He started screaming, and I didn't know what to do. So I ran in the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and ran upstairs to Kevin's room, finding him crawling under the covers, crying. I told him not to be worried. I locked the door, and I called for 911 from my phone and informed them what's happening, while hearing this back downstairs how Karen was still screaming like a lunatic banshee at the door, but suddenly it went quiet. Like, too quiet. I then heard crash. She broke one of the windows. I heard she was screaming from the living room, smashing, like screaming for Thomas to show off his coward face, and she will take Kevin with her no matter what he tries to do. And the police can actually hear this on the phone, and since the operator told me that the one car was actually on the way, and they told me to blockade the door with anything that's possible, even though that door was probably won't even last long if she tried to slam herself against it. In fact, good thing I took the part of the dresser, because that was what she would do eventually. After she heard me moving the dresser, she ran up the stairs like if she was having fire on her butt. And as the dresser had just been put from the door, she started banging, screaming like a lunatic. And I've actually even heard that she stabbed the door. I would with what? If it was a knife or a screwdriver, I don't even know. But I heard of the operator told me that the police will be there in less than a few minutes. I told them to hurry because I don't know how long the door would even last. And they could actually hear the screaming. Now, she wasn't even saying any particular sound of word. Now she was just screaming gibberish. Like, there was no words at all, just screaming like a complete wild animal. The only words I could actually somehow hear was like, Thomas, I will kill you, take Kevin with me. She was screaming like almost like if she was singing. But after a while, I heard that the front door slam open because the police kicked in, and they ran upstairs and told Karen to drop the knife. Yeah, you heard me right. She was wielding a knife, stabbing the door in hope to get in, which likely would never happen. The police officers gave Karen a warning to drop the knife again. If she didn't do it, they will tase her, which then she started charging against the police, which one of them used a taser and she dropped the knife and fell to the floor. She was arrested. During this process, I actually had even called my mom, and she was freaked out. She and my dad came over almost immediately right afterwards. They were informed by the police what happened. They could even see Karen in the back in the squad car, screaming a lunatic like, "How dare you take my sweet boy from me, Thomas!" Screaming like her lungs out. Afterwards, my parents decided to take with me and Kevin to our house for the next day, since even Kevin probably would even want to stay there, because now this really scared him. And I'm frankly being honest, I do believe that she didn't even have had attendant attention to take him just to raising him. Since she tried to kill him once when he was 2 years old. And now, when he's 5, I have really had strong indication to believe that she would try to kill him again. Now this time with a knife or something. I don't know. But it scares me to think about it. The next day, well, actually, it's only a few after we came home. My dad called Thomas and explained everything what happened. Thomas freaked out and said that he will be home early by next morning. So apparently he left as soon as possible. He says he could and drove all over the all night. In the early morning, he actually showed up. Kevin, though, he didn't want to sleep alone, so he slept in my room that night, which I didn't mind. And honestly, Thomas very thanked me for saving his son. That he couldn't believe that Karen would even go this far. And I had to be saying I needed some, even I needed some therapy afterwards of this, like for a couple of months. Even Thomas needed to have Kevin for a therapy himself, because this was terrifying enough for a 5-year-old boy. But Thomas never even had to worry about Karen ever again. Now she had been put in an asylum or a mental institution for the rest of her life, apparently. Apparently she was found unsuitable for even being released, and again. Thomas remained a good friend to my parents, and Kevin, well, he's a friend of mine too. Even me and Kevin actually had a very terrible nightmares for quite some time after this particular event. Some of the nightmares were where Karen managed to smashing through the door, find me standing there, killing me with her knife, and then I could somehow see how she walks over to Kevin, grabs him, drags him out of the door, as well screaming while he's screaming from my name to help him, while I lay there on the floor, lifeless. Or some of the nightmares how she kills them by stabbing himself. But luckily though, that never happened. And after this particular event, Kevin and I actually became a little bit closer. In fact, he started calling me my big sister, Daniela. In fact, Thomas was actually quite happy and surprised that Kevin called me his big sister. And he just smiled and said, I don't see anything wrong with it. In fact, I really see Kevin as my younger brother, and honestly, I would not hesitate to do anything as possible to protect him. Well, I may not even I wouldn't kill anyone in order to protect Kevin, but I would try anything as possible just to keep him safe. I'm just saying, Kevin, after all this happened, he still had some nightmares for a while, had to go to therapy for that, and of course I was there for him too. I mean, I was there. So me and Kevin grew closer, and we saw each other as like siblings, which I still do. And Karen, even though there's no way for us to ever meet again, but if the would had happened, you need to stay away from me and my new brother Kevin. Because this horrified not only me, but Kevin himself. So please, stay the heck away from me and my family.